As punishment for sneaking out, Teo isn't allowed to go to the soccer match that Diosquiero planned for all the competitors to go to. He argued with Luna that it wasn't Aurelio's fault that they were out, that he made him come with him, and so everybody else gets to go except Teo, who just hangs out on the boat with the priests. Nia and Shio bring him souvenirs, and Shio feels really bad that he actually kind of had a good time while Teo was still stuck on the boat. So by the time they go to dinner, Teo is really excited to just get out of there. They head to the temple, and when they get there, there are massive jaguar statues everywhere, and that makes Teo just like the slightest bit uncomfy because his mom is the goddess of birds. He doesn't particularly like cats, especially not ones that are this big. As they get to the entrance of the temple, there is another like big jaguar just hanging out, and Teo thinks it's another statue until it starts to move and comes up to Ocello and licks their face. Oh. And 3 more jaguars appear and just pile on top of them. At this point, Teo is clutching to Nia for dear life, and then something tugs at one of his wings, and so he turns and there's a little jaguar cub just like batting at it. Shio and Nia are just absolutely cracking up, and even though Aurelio is standing over with Auricella, he is still smiling, like he's very amused with this. And Ocello calls the jaguar cub over, and it's a very sweet moment of like these jaguars just like licking their face and just like, I want to say pig piling on top of them, and it's weird seeing Ocello like this. Like, this is not the super loud and rude Gold Semedios that Teo knows. When they finally get to dinner, Diosquiero isn't as intimidating as Teo expected him to be, and really they're more just like loud and like overly friendly. And Ocello acts a little bit like that too. Like, now that they're home, it's a totally different vibe than it has been everywhere else. And it's really strange for Teo to see them so relaxed and not be a total asshole. It was in this moment of like writing the script that I had like this reconciliation moment that maybe Ocello isn't as bad as I thought they were. You know, I've seen stuff, I believe Aiden has sold Audicella and Ocello apologist stickers and things like that, and I have never been an apologist for either of these two because it costs $0 to be nice. They're being assholes for no reason, but in this moment, like, something tugged at my heartstrings and I was like, oh, maybe they can change. I still have no forgiveness for Audicella. There's nope, I can't do it. I can't do it. I think she's a really interesting character, but I cannot excuse her actions. Nothing exciting happens at dinner, and it's just everybody goes to bed early because how many trials have we gone through? 3. We've gone through 3 trials, so people are kind of starting to feel it. And through the evening, Teo realizes that Shio has become more and more tense and closed off. When Teo asks what's wrong, Shio admits that back home, he shares a room with his siblings. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when we first meet Mala Suerte and Teo is talking about him, Shio has 13 siblings between the ages of like 2 and 30. So who knows how many of those siblings he shares a room with? So sleeping on the boat in a room all by himself is a little weird and a little too quiet. Teo offers to let Shio sleep in his room, but Shio very quickly, like 180s, abruptly turns him down and tells Teo like, oh, I've actually got stuff I need to do by myself in my room, so good night. Teo even offers to hang out for a little bit before bed, but he also doesn't want to baby Shio, so he just like says goodnight and, you know, reminds him, I'm across the hall if you need anything, and they go to bed. The next morning, everybody's getting ready for the trial, and Teo feels a little excitement. The 4th trial is being held by Diosa Opción, the goddess of problem-solving, ingenuity, and choices in Labyrinto, which, to everybody's surprise and Teo's delight, is a jade city. When Nia learns what Opción is the goddess of, she is not as thrilled as Teo is because problem solving is not her strong suit, and she's very much a I'll punch my way out of this kind of strategist. All of the golds are confused because there's never been a trial that's been held in a Jade City before, and Aristella is like, what are we even doing in a Jade City anyways? Like I said, I am not an apologist. She needs to knock that attitude off, my dude. And Luna gives because Diosa Opción is holding the 4th trial. And Teo is a little bit hopeful. Were the other gods finally seeing that jades were entirely useless? If they were being chosen by Sol to compete, and a jade god was even hosting one of the trials, did that mean maybe, finally, jades were going to get a chance? It was an opportunity, one that Teo didn't want to waste. If he could pull this off, he would have the chance to change things for jades on a monumental level. They get to the city and start heading into the arena where there is the usual cheering crowds, but as they're getting off the boat, Nia just grabs Teo's arm and goes, "Look!" He didn't know what he was supposed to be looking at. The tiered seating was packed full of people sitting shoulder to shoulder. They waved pennants and flags in the air, just like every other trial. But then he realized they weren't white flags of the golds or even Sol. They were bright blue-green. Jade. Specifically, all of the flags in the arena have Teo's mom's glyph on them. And there's even homemade signs and posters of Teo and things that say like, "Hero of the Jade." Everyone goes crazy when the camera cuts to Teo in the arena and like puts him up on the Jumbotron. This is a very big moment because if you remember, for the first several trials there were only gold flags in the stand. It's not Teo's home turf, but is as close as he's gonna get during the trials, and this is a total shift in energy for everybody. He meets up with his mom on the platform and she tells him that he is amazing and is all of their hero. And who does he look at when she tells him this? When he found him, Aurelio was already watching, an open, unabashed smile gracing his features. Teo smiled back so big it made his face ache. He didn't even care that Auristela was seething next to him. She didn't matter. Teo, a lowly jade from a tiny, forgotten city, was standing in the ranks of the best young heroes in all of Reino del Sol. The people were calling to him. They wanted him to win, and Teo was not going to let them down. The fourth trial is taking place in a ruined temple that's covered in moss and roots and looks absolutely decrepit and is very, very unsettling for Teo. Even though the temples in all the jade cities are shabbier than they are in the golds one, he's never seen one that looks this desolate before, and like, this is just the arena. This isn't Diosa Opcion's like actual temple, but he's never seen a temple look this ruined before. Luna explains that the fourth challenge is to collect stones hidden within the temple that are each worth a different number of points. The lower value stones will be easier to find, easier to get to, and only get harder as the point values go up. Obsidian stones are worth 10 points, jade stones are worth 25, and gold stones are worth 100 points. And somewhere within the temple, there is a replica of the soul stone that is worth 500 points. It sounds super simple, but Teo knows that it's not going to be simple. Diosa Opcion's city is called Laberinto. Like, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be tricks to this. There's going to be choices. It is going to be way more complicated than what Luna is telling them. All of the competitors have an hour to gather as many stones as they can and then return them to the top of the temple where they'll deposit them. Once you deposit your stones, you can't go back for more. Like, that is it. Our trio is determined to stick together on this one. It hasn't worked before, but that doesn't mean it's not gonna work now. Once they gather all their stones, they plan on divvying them up and giving Shio a little more since he's so low in the rankings right now. In a shocking turn of events, Nia is the girl with the plan this time because Teo is a little bit too distracted, just a smidgen distracted, going over to Aurelio and flirting with him a little bit. Ready to get knocked out of first place, golden boy? Auristela's attention snapped to Teo, her face pinching with restrained anger. But Aurelio's expression softened to an amused grin. You think you can get more points than me, bird brain? Oh, I know I can. A spark ignited behind Aurelio's eyes. Prove it. Golden Boy Bird Brain feels very Wise Girl Seaweed Brain, like Percy Jackson coded to me, and I am here for it. Auristela drags Aurelio away and Nia punches Teo in the arm and is like, "We gotta focus!" Everybody gets ready and then the hour begins. The first cache of stones is in this courtyard with this decrepit looking statue that is like too worn down to be recognizable, except like a big ol' slash where the face is supposed to be. It has this big gold stone on its head and that's what everyone goes for. And while everybody is going for the stones, Shio has stopped in the middle of the pathway, not looking good. Teo tries to like reassure him and urge him on, but Shio just is frozen. The kid looks terrified, slowly as Teo's urging him, starts to move again. While everybody else is going for the gold and jade stones, there is a whole pile of like black obsidian stones just like sitting untouched. Nia says it's probably because all the other golds think they're too good to get the low value obsidian stones, and Teo's like, they're sitting out in the open, like they're so easy to get, why not take them? But whatever, more obsidian stones for him. He just needs to focus on getting through the trial and like beating Aurelio, but like in a really, really flirty way. Teo's like, this is too easy, we'll just get the obsidian stones because everybody else is avoiding them and we'll be fine. Our trio goes into the actual temple and decides to go the opposite direction that everybody else went in. They cross through an archway into the temple and everything goes silent. In the courtyard, they were able to hear the crowd cheering for everybody, but like once they're inside the temple, it's just like completely cut off and it's really, really disorienting. It's cramped and dark and moldy, and they're all like, how the fuck are we gonna navigate this? Like this is like a labyrinth. The city is called Labyrinto. Like, come on, guys. And so they decide, up until this point, we've never really had a plan, so why start now? And they just go for it. They are running through hallways. They are turning and running through more hallways. And after a while, everybody's like, God, how big is this place? It just keeps going on for forever and ever and ever. All of the hallways they're running down are absolutely identical, but it can't be the same hallway, right? Like they're running through these archways and it can't be the same hallway. In order to like reorient themselves, Nia turns her bangles into this big ol' axe and slashes one of the walls. Now they know if they come across a slash in the wall again, they're going down the same hallway. But they aren't. They aren't going down the same hallway. They go through the archway again and reappear back at the other end of the hallway with Nia's slash in the wall. Nia turns to Teo and is like, you jinxed it by saying it was too easy. And Teo's like, I don't sound like that, because she was mocking him. Shio just steps between them and they both stop arguing. Teo just sighs and just like, okay, so we need to focus, and they try the hallway again and end up with the same results. At this point, Nia is sick of it. She's like, screw these doorways. I'm gonna make my own doorway. Nia just turns her bangles into a club and smashes through one of the walls before Teo can tell her that's a bad idea. The entire room shakes, and Teo turns to Nia and is like, you could have made the floor collapse. The whole thing could have just collapsed on us. And Nia's like, oh, come on, I barely put any force behind it. And Shio's just like, that was barely anything? Which Nia takes as a compliment, and now there is a hole in the wall, so they decide to get out of this never-ending hallway and go through the hole. This room is arguably worse than the one before. It smells mildewy, it is tiny, and it has nothing in it except for a door on the other end of the room. Nia is getting bad vibes from the door, and so she turns around to go back into the never-ending hallway, except the hole she made in the wall is gone. There is no other exit from this room besides that door. Nia offers to make another hole in the wall to get out, and Teo and Shio are just like, no, this is probably how we ended up here in the first place. Let's not try to piss off the temple again. The door is the best option to get out of here. And because she has the impulse control of a toddler, Nia just like walks up to the door and opens it. Nothing happens for a moment, and then this giant stone hand shoves Nia back and slams the door shut. Teo and Shio are concerned about Nia being alright, but Nia is up with her club again, ready to fight this hand. She goes up to the door and the exact same thing happens again. The boys can't stop her before she tries a third time and gets the same result. It is obvious to everybody but Nia that this isn't working. Nia calls the hand a rude asshole. Teo realizes that maybe the temple threw them in this room because they weren't playing the game correctly. They were being the assholes. He stops Nia before she can try to basically punch the wall again, and heart racing goes up to the door, like very slowly, very carefully. He isn't quite sure his plan's gonna work, but it's better than nothing at this point. Tentatively, he knocks on the door. Nothing happens. Teo asks if they can go through the door, and the door opens, where he's bracing for this hand to come and slap him across the room and hit the wall again, but nothing happens, and our little trio can finally leave this room. Our trio emerges into a much larger room with an absolutely untouched cache of stones. The golds, the jades, the obsidians, they're all there. Teo does a little morality check and is like, we should just take all of them, right? And Nia is absolutely game for it. Shio starts to like go for the stones, but Teo stops him before he can move. There has to be a catch to this room. And even Nia realizes that there's some weird stuff happening on the floor here. The entire floor is covered in glyphs. His mother's quetzal was easy to spot. Not all the Dios' glyphs, but definitely all the competitors. That's my dad's, Nia chirped, pointing excitedly to the glyph with 3 mountains. I don't recognize this one, Teo said. Among the familiar glyphs, there was a series of tiles with a goat head. It was grinning, its open mouth lined with sharp teeth. Damn, that's Venganza, Nia said, backing away from the tile. The god of vengeance, Shio explained, the color draining from his face. Oh, Teo had only learned about the obsidian gods in school. He clearly wasn't as well versed in the history of the betrayer gods as the golds were. Yeah, let's not step on those ones, Nia said. Nothing good will happen. They assume it's probably best to just step on their parents' glyphs, and it's probably harder to get to the gold stones and the jade stones versus the obsidian stones. Shio asks if Teo can fly to get the stones, but the ceiling is too low, and it'd be very likely that Teo would just hit the ceiling and then fall onto the ground because he doesn't quite have control over his wings yet. Shio looks terrified, and Teo is once again reminded about how unfair it is that Shio's here in the first place. I know we've gone over this before, but he is 13, he has no training, he has no special skills besides bad luck, and he even brings that on himself, so he's basically set up for failure. So Teo and Nia decide that they'll go after the stones, and Shio can just like stand guard. Teo gets to the obsidian stones just fine, and Nia gets to the gold stones and starts heading for the jade stones when something in the room cracks. Teo's head whipped to Nia. She perched on the tile, eyes wide. It wasn't me, she said with a jerky shake of her head. Panic squeezed Teo's throat. He turned to find Shio. His foot was on a tile, the stone completely shattered. I slipped, Shio cried out, eyes bulging. Before Teo could react, the ground beneath his feet shuddered. Stones start dropping, and the floor becomes a chasm. Shio is slipping, Nia is terrified and falling, Teo's trying to use his wings, but he's already falling too, and the world plunges into darkness. So Teo falls and ends up on essentially a really bad rock slide. At the end of the slide, he pops out into this new room that has a lot of little offshoots on the walls. It's likely that more people will be spit out if they fail their little challenges and games. Despite failing his task, there is still an untouched cache of stones here. Besides the holes in the wall where people may or may not pop out, the room is basically this grated floor over some water. And Teo, because he doesn't want to risk it for the biscuit, decides to go for the obsidian stones, and as he moves across this grated floor, the water underneath starts to ripple a little bit. He doesn't know what, but there is something in the water, and he doesn't necessarily want to find out what that is. Teo gets to the obsidian stones and tries to be as quiet as possible, but the water under him begins to churn. He almost is done. He almost has all the obsidian stones when something ensnares his foot. He looks down and 2 tentacles have hooked themselves around his ankles. He tries to move away, but another tentacle shoots up and snatches his wrist. Teo is not strong enough to beat this tentacle-y creature, so you know what he does instead of just like trying to pull away? He leans down and bites the tentacles. The creature lets Teo go, and Teo, as quickly as he can, dumps the rest of the obsidian stones into his bag and tries to fly away, but the tentacles are there again, and they snatch him out of the sky, pull him down, bang him against the grated floor, and Teo is holding on for dear life. He has no tools except for the now empty box that the obsidian stones were in, but something is better than nothing. So he manages to grab the chest and slam it on the tentacle, and that injures the tentacles enough to release him, and Teo can finally scramble away. As this tentacle creature is like sinking back into the water, Teo is just thinking, oh my god, this was just for the obsidian stones. I cannot imagine going for the gold or the jade stones and what I would have to deal with then. And as a fun cue, Ocello drops into the room. Once again, we're going back to Huemak's warnings and tips and tricks at the beginning of the book. Problem solving is not their strong suit. To his credit, Teo does try to call out to Ocello to warn them of the tentacle creature, and Ocello ignores him and goes immediately for the gold stones. As the tentacles appear, instead of getting ripped apart, Othello just straight up tries to wrestle the tentacles. As Teo watches this, he sees like this set of stairs leading out of this oubliette. Teo's essentially like, I see you have your hands full. Good luck, I'm getting out of here. As Teo heads up the stairs, his watch buzzes. They are halfway through the challenge now and only have a half hour left. Teo knows he needs to find more stones if he wants to be ranked first, so he heads up the temple, kind of where he knows the platform is going to be because it's at the top of the temple, but he's not heading there yet. He veers off to try and find some more stones, and in the next room he enters, there's already some other gold semidioses battling out for the higher value stones. Each stone is spaced out, and between each stone there is a log that is swinging back and forth with blades on either end. I don't know why, but I'm thinking of like the swinging knives from like Scooby-Doo, like Spooky Island. That's what I'm imagining. And at the very, very far end of the room, Shochi and Marino are battling it out for some of the jade stones. Teo is going for the obsidian stones because he does not want to get involved with that, and he's hopping back and forth trying to get into the rhythm and not get like hit by the very sharp swinging logs. Marino ends up getting the very last jade stone, and Shochi is pissed. As he's running away from her, Shochi uses her vines to snatch Marino's backpack, but Marino doesn't stop running. He just keeps smiling as he dips, because when Shochi opens the bag, it's full of plain rocks and no stones. That makes her even more pissed. Her eyes go dark, and when she shoots her vines out at Marino again, they're not quite the same green that they were before. They're like dark and twisted. The vines snatch Marino around his waist and drag him to the ground, then just start getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and Marino finally like kind of starts to panic and tells Shochi to knock it off. Teo was sitting here witnessing all of this happen. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Dark shadows hollowed Shochi's eyes, violent red thorns sprouting from the vines, cutting into Marino and drawing golden blood against his dark skin. Marino screamed, a sound so terrible and frightened that it snapped Teo into action. Teo launches himself into the air and slams into Shochi, which breaks her concentration. He expects her to turn on him and start attacking him, but when they get up, instead Shochi just looks horrified. She instantly tries to apologize to Marino, but he is out of here. He dips. Teo catches up with him, and when Marino thanks him, Teo tells him he's just returning the favor for what happened on the island with the Aladrihes when Marino saved him from falling off the island. They split off again, and this time Teo is even more careful because shit is starting to get real. The stress is starting to get to the whole competition. We're getting down to the wire here. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the pressure and stress of the competition, but people were getting more and more brutal as the trials went on. He didn't want to think about what might have happened to Marino if he hadn't interfered. Things are getting really tense. Teo is looking for Nia and Chio. He is looking for stones. He sees somebody dash around a corner again and decides to follow them because even if it isn't his friends, maybe they will lead him to a new cache of stones. He finds himself in this tall, narrow room. There's no ceiling, just like vines covering the wall, and Desi is there. They do find the stones. Nothing has been touched yet, and all the stones are on these like various ledges, like at different heights, depending on like the value of the stones. Teo doesn't move or make any noise, but Desi turns around, sees Teo there, turns back to the wall, and starts scaling it. He goes right for the jade stones, but when he picks them up, the walls just start closing in. The stone slabs start to slide out and disappear, so Teo goes right for the obsidian stones while Desi is finishing gathering all the jade stones. He also comes up and gets the gold stone and then scrambles to like the top of the room, then is motioning for Teo to like hurry his ass up. Teo is as good of a climber as he is a runner, which is to say, not very good, but he can fly. He jumps and hopes that his wings are strong enough to carry him, and he gets so close to the top. Teo can't get that like last little push to get out of there, so he just hopes for a quick death, except before he can fall too far, Desi reaches out and pulls him out of the room. The two of them like crumple to the floor at the top of the temple. It is daylight again. The crowd is cheering. The finish line is like right there. Otzi is already completed the trial. Like she is taking no chances. Her little stones are in the little dais. At about the same time, Marino arrives and immediately starts checking on Desi to make sure that he's all right. In my notes, I at this point wrote, "Are they dating? Question mark, question mark, question mark." Because thinking about it now, I think they could be. And I think they are. I don't know why it took me this long to realize that, but I think they are also a pair of lover boys. Teo is just like, thank God I'm here. I managed to get through the trial without dying or getting stuck. I can just finish now, and I've even got some extra time. As he approached the barrier to cross the finish, he overheard Marino say, "Did either of you find the soul stone?" Desi shook his head no, but Otzi nodded. "It's on the floor below us," she said and signed, nodding towards the main outer steps. "But it's impossible to get," Otzi added. "It's hanging over this huge pit. I gave up, immediately, but the twins were still trying to figure it out when I left. Aurelio and Aristella." Teo checked his watch. There were 15 minutes left before the trial was over. Teo knows that he won't win with just obsidian stones, but if he gets the soul stone, he could win. So instead of crossing the finish line, Teo turns back and goes to get the soul stone. I have in my notes here. Scripting note, I have 8 more chapters left. 25%, we're in the home stretch, baby. That is not the percentage that my Kindle is telling me. It says that I'm only at 65% instead of 75. It is, what time is it? 11:44 in the evening. My plan is to get this done tonight, because I have 2 hours left. We're going to do it by 2 o'clock. We're going to be done. The room is easy enough to find. It's exactly where Otzi said it was, but the stone it's sitting in is this large obsidian hand extending from the ceiling, which looks like the night sky, and it's over this giant pit that's in the middle of the floor. The twins are there, and as soon as Arisa sees Teo, she gets pissed and angry and is glaring at him, and when Aurelio sees her looking over his shoulder, he is pleasantly surprised to turn and see Teo there. Before Teo can chicken out, he launches himself into the air and goes for the stone. Because, see, that giant pit in the middle of the room isn't going to stop him, because he's got wings. And he's finally using them, just like Luna said. The only problem is there isn't anywhere for him to land to grab the stone. So even though he tries grabbing onto the giant stone wrist, he slips and slides into the palm, and he nearly sends the replica soul stone over the edge, but he manages to stop it and grab onto it before it falls into the pit. There he has it. 500 points sitting in his hands. He is momentarily ecstatic when he glides back down to the ground, and he turns to show Aurelio, but Aristella barrels into Teo. She knocks him down, pins his wings to the ground, and sends the soul stone flying onto the floor. Her eyes are dark and have this bluish purple ring around them, which isn't normal. Aristella tells Aurelio to get the soul stone, but he refuses. For a moment, hurt flashed across her face before it was quickly consumed by rage. "I told you he was manipulating you," she seethed. Black veins splintered out around her eyes. Teo balked. "What are you talking about?" "Stella, stop this," Aurelio insisted, but she wouldn't listen. Aristella raised the soul stone over her head. Aurelio lunged. Terror squeezed Teo's chest. He threw his arms over his head and squeezed his eyes shut. Crash! Debris hit Teo's cheek. When he opened his eyes, he saw Aurelio had thrown out his arm in an attempt to shield Teo. Aristella had smashed the soul stone on the ground. Pieces of glass and shards of white that looked eerily like bones skittered across the floor. Everyone is shook. Teo doesn't know what happened, but he is freaked out. Aurelio gets Aristella's attention, and she finally looks like she comes back into herself, like she was not fully present in the brain as she was smashing the soul stone. The bruises very quickly fade from her eyes, and when she realizes she's still pinning Teo to the ground, she jumps up and leaves the boys. They watch her go for a moment, and then their watches buzz, saying that they only have 5 minutes left to get back up to the top of the temple and to deposit their stones to end the trial. Teo knows his way to the platform, so he and Aurelio go up there together. When they get to the top, there's even more contestants there than when Teo was there earlier, and Luna is there now as well. Nia is also there, and Teo asks her where Shio is, because Shio is not with the rest of the competitors, and he hasn't found him either. She says that she doesn't know where he is, and then just says, "What did we do?" Teo tells her to dump the stones, and she does, otherwise she will be disqualified and won't get the points for completing the trial. Aurelio pushes Teo forward next, and they both start emptying their stones into the bowl. The seconds are counting down for the trial, and Shio finally appears at the steps, like leading up to the platform. He is frazzled, and he only has 3 little obsidian stones just like clutched to his chest as he is racing up the steps. Shio flung himself forward, but his foot caught on the last step. He crashed to his knees. A gasp caught in Teo's throat, dread spilling over him like icy water. 3 obsidian stones fell from his hands and clattered across the floor, just as mariachi's cornet sounded. I have a pit in my stomach reading that did not make me feel good. Just the end of this chapter, I remember like reading it and just like needing to put the book down and take a break, because this poor unlucky sweet boy. This poor boy. He is going through so much. Once again, the rankings are determined. This time in first place, it is Desi, and then it is Aurelio, Teo, Nia, Marino, Otzi, because she wanted to cover her ass and make sure she got everything done in time, Ocello, Aristella, Shochi, and Shio. Teo cannot believe he is in third. This is like one of the first times we see Teo look at his own ranking before he looks at Shio's. Meanwhile, people are still very much processing the rankings. Aristella has dropped down to 8th place, and nobody looks happy. Not even Desi, as he's being like escorted off for his like, oh, you won first place in the trial interview. Nia is doing good in 4th. Like, she is solid. She is our goodest girl. And then after all of these emotions happen, Teo realizes that Shio has dropped to last place. Despite looking for more obsidian stones, Shio didn't find many, and even though he did end up finding just a few, he didn't finish, so none of those points counted. And Teo, very much like me, feels sick to his stomach. He wants to throw up, and so do I. In the pursuit of becoming Sunbearer, Teo had forgotten his main goal, to keep his friends safe. Now Shio was in danger of being sacrificed. Shio is justifiably upset and does not want to hang out when they all get back to the boat. We do not get our trio debrief this time. Teo just keeps going over the situation over and over and over again in his head. If he hadn't gone for the soul stone, if he had gone to look for Shio instead, like, would things have ended up differently? Thinking back to that first night together with Nia and Shio and the hot chocolate, Shio had been such a little kid then and had been looking up to Teo to keep him safe. And in this dark moment, Teo realizes that maybe Aurelio was right. Like, maybe he didn't belong here, and whatever he thought Soul had seen in him just didn't exist. He does not believe that he is worthy to be here. The next day, they get to see some more of the city, and for the first time, there's no fancy trams or anything to like take them up to the temple. There is just a bunch of rickety wooden steps and like vans that are taking them throughout the city. Aristella takes issue with this because she is who she is and believes she's above it, so she's like very like, okay, I cannot stand that. The city itself is different than anything Teo's ever seen before, because Diosa Option, in one of her like things that she is the goddess of, is choices and options. So the city itself is just like this hodgepodge of different styles and architectural things, very like mishmashed together, but looks really, really cool. And Teo realizes that it is a maze, because if you have a city called Labyrinto, like, of course it is. Nia says, I feel bad for whoever delivers the mail, and honestly, me too, girl. Their like fun activity for the day is going to this outdoor market. Nia goes shopping for some jewelry, weapons, but Teo and Shio don't really have the energy or the desire to go shopping. And so the two of them just chill on these benches outside. Shio has been really quiet, more so than normal. Once they're finally alone, Teo checks on him, but Shio isn't really open to talking right now and pretty much tells Teo, like, I've lasted this long, all I can do now is my best. And Teo admits that this is a very healthy outlook, but he internally feels so bad because he believes that this is his fault. Marino ends up joining our two boys because he doesn't really feel up to all of this right now. Not very long after, Shochi and Otzi follow, and they're just like hanging out. Everybody's kind of over it and they all just kind of want to go home at this point. But Shoji says that she doesn't think the academy is going to give them time off between the trials and school, which is really, really sad. And Teo does feel some sympathy for them because even though they're all kind of like selfish and full of themselves, because that is how he views the golds, he does get to go home and do whatever he wants after all of this is over. Nia and Desi join them a while later, and Nia complains that she shopped till she dropped and she didn't even buy anything because she's just like so out of it. The vibes are just completely off. And all of them just kind of like sit there until their time is up, just like disassociating. Not Ocello and Audistella though. They have multiple bags, and Ocello even bought an entire punching bag, which the priests are not quite sure how they're going to fit it in these little vans that drove them all up here, but they're going to make it work. Aurelio went shopping too, but he has a much smaller, nondescript looking bag. Audistella was like, did you even buy anything? And Aurelio was like, yeah, I did, but the shop owner picked everything out for me, so I don't really know what I bought. He opens up his little like nondescript bag and it is completely full of candy. Everybody jumps at that. They're asking all the different candies as Aurelio is passing them out. Like, clearly these kids are way too sheltered at the academy, and the mood lightens as everybody gets to indulge in their sweet tooth on their way to the temple. Aurelio gives Teo this little marzipan and they're smiling at each other and it's really cute, and that's like all we get from the description is that like Teo's surprised at Aurelio's choice to go buy candy and Aurelio gives Teo candy, and it's like, even though they're all sad, I still love my boys. Very much like the city, Diosa Opcion's temple is a smattering of styles and endless hallways that lead into the dining room. They meet the Diosa, and when they start dinner, she has one hairstyle and looks one way, but then as dinner progresses, like her hair will grow or shorten or change. Her dress looks one color when they arrive, and then when she sits down it's another. Like, a lot is going on all at once. Shio comments that he's surprised that she's a jade because of how powerful she is, and Ocello just like scoffs. So Opcion like changes their hair to be like pink and fuchsia, which throws them off, and she tells them all that it's just a choice. Choice is the most powerful force in existence, much more powerful than meat, jades, golds. These descriptions mean nothing, really. We gave them to ourselves. It's humanity that has all the power. Audistella disagrees vehemently, and Opcion says, like, you're very much like your mom, like, you think the humans serve us, don't you? But in reality, the dioses and semi-dioses are supposed to serve humanity because without them and their belief, they would be powerless. There are a smattering of comments about how the gods keep the world safe, just like how Sol sacrificed themselves. Yeah, that's the whole reason we have the Sunbearer Trials, isn't it? Otzi said, unsure. To keep the soul stone fueled. Everyone turned to Aurelio. He was usually so quiet whenever they ate together. It was a bit startling to witness him speaking up. But he ignored the stares and kept his focus on Diosa Opcion, his expression stony and serious. Without them, the world would end. Yes, a single choice could end the world, and only one of you gets to make that choice. What does that say about the rest of your power? But I suppose that's why you're all here, isn't it? Teo is thinking a lot about that conversation when they get back to the boat. He is thinking about all the arguments he and Aurelio have had about the meaning behind the trial, the meaning of like becoming the Sunbearer or becoming the sacrifice. Now we're in the end game. Our crew is headed back to Sol Temple, where they have one more day before the 5th and final trial, and our trio is doing some very last minute prep work trying to figure out what could be going on with the last trial. It's getting late, so Teo really wants to go to bed, but Shio's like, can't we stay up a little longer? Teo doesn't know if it's because Shio's nervous about the trial or he doesn't want to be alone, but he can't say no to a request like that, so the three of them stay up watching TV until they fall asleep. The next morning, they arrive at Sol Temple. The only thing happening today is basically a big fancy dinner between all of the competitors and their parents and Luna. So Teo is going to shower before getting ready, and then there is a knock at his door. He hopes it's Aurelia, but when he opens the door, he is very unpleasantly surprised because Verdad and Chisme are there and they want to talk to him. Teo is instantly like, am I in trouble? And they're both like, no, like, we just want to interview you. Verdad is like, I want to hear from the Jade who climbed the ranks and is an inspiration to your people, while Chisme is just like standing there being sleazy as all hell. I still hate him. Teo agrees, and so they take him to this little room in one of the lower levels of the temple, and Verdad starts off with some like really easy questions about Quetzalon and if he's traveled before, and things like that, before Verdad starts pulling out questions like, so, like, you've been in some really tough situations and you don't have the same training as your competitors. What is that like? And Teo's like, well, it is the Sunbearer Trials. Like, it's not going to be easy. And Verdad starts to, like, push on these answers a little bit more. She tells him that this year, the competitors seem particularly driven. Teo doesn't quite know what she's referring to, so she pulls up a video of Aristella during the last trial when she had Teo pinned down when he was trying to get the soul stone. Verdad asks Teo if they've had a rivalry in the past, and if in that moment when she is holding the soul stone, like getting ready to smash it, if he thought that she might kill him. Teo tells her that they've never ever been friends, and like they don't necessarily have a rivalry, but he realizes that in that moment he did kind of like have the fear that she was going to kill him. But also that just feels like a really big leap. Like saying that they have a rivalry is going a step too far. So Verdad pulls up another clip of the first trial where Ocello was throwing the boulders down the mountain. Teo thinks about when they were in the Opal Oasis and how the jaguars so readily jumped on Ocello. In that moment they were so like playful and joyful, and looking at the video clip of Ocello in the first trial, it's not the same person that was at that temple. And Teo realizes that what Verdad is talking about has kind of been simmering in the back of his mind since the first trial, but like it seems crazy. He can only speak for himself, and he's been very goal-oriented, but he doesn't think that any of the competitors like genuinely want to hurt each other. He wasn't paying attention to her anymore. His mind raced as he searched more clips and still frames. The burning nests from the second trial, Nia and Aristella battling it out during the third, Shochi's thorny vines squeezing the air out of Marino. Teo had thought he'd imagined it. It was so easy to overlook, but now he could see it, even in the shaking videos and blurred images. Each time someone acted with particular violence, their eyes had gone the same glassy black. Some instances were fleeting, like Nia during the third trial, but others were more prominent, like the black veins he'd seen webbed around Aristella's eyes when she held the fake soulstone over his head. Something, or someone, was messing with the competitors. Verdad realizes that she's kept Teo for way too long and releases him before Chisme can ask him any questions, but honestly, like, what questions is Chisme gonna ask that will not just be like thinly veiled insults at this point? Teo is late and he's racing to the banquet hall, but he's also trying to pull up his own videos of the trial and remember moments where people got vicious. When he gets to the banquet hall, he barrels into the room and just like immediately blurts, something is wrong with the trials. Everyone stops and stares at him, and so he goes over to Luna and shows her some of the videos and images he's found in this brief sprint from like the interview up to the banquet. Before he can really show Luna anything substantial, like Lumbre stands and silences everyone. She starts going off. She starts talking about how having Teo here is a mockery of the trials and the tradition, and Teo's just trying to get attention. And Teo is like, I am not the first Jade to compete in the trials, but this may be the first time that the trials have been sabotaged. Lumbre, in particular, does not take it well. She grabs Teo's phone and just like shatters it on the ground, because that's something rational adults do. Aurelio jumps up and Lumbre orders him to sit down, but he doesn't. He just kind of like stands there watching. Teo tries to reason with Luna, but she tells him that it's not her place to question Soul's will, and he takes this as she's seen that there is maybe something going on with the trials, but she hasn't done anything about it. Everybody looks just as confused and unsure as Luna as Lumbre tells Teo that he should be grateful to even be here and to not embarrass his mom. And Teo loses it just a little bit. Rightfully so, but just loses it just a little bit. Somebody is going to die tomorrow, in case you forgot, and all you care about right now is dinner? You care about the dinner? It's the first time that somebody is like very outright acknowledged the point of the trials, because it's been a fact. They know that someone's gonna die at the end, but it's not something they've talked about at all. At this point, Teo just like cannot stop talking. He starts talking about how the rankings could be rigged and straight up tells Lumbre, like, your daughter could die tomorrow. Like, do you care about that? Shockingly, Shio is the one to cut Teo off this time. Teo's thinking, like, how could everybody just like not care that something might be going on? And Shio tells him, like, you are just making things worse right now. Just stop. Like, you're making things worse. What did I miss? What part of the quote did I miss? You knew what this was when you came here, Luna said, slow and deliberately. I didn't choose to be a competitor, Teo argued, but he could hear the defeat in his own voice. This runs our world, Teo. You knew that. You just didn't care when it didn't affect you. It hurts, but it's true. This is an argument Teo can't win. His mom is really concerned about him. Lumbre is pissed and wants him punished. And like everybody is kind of just watching this all unfold, not really giving much of a reaction. So Teo was sent back to his room and he feels humiliated and angry. And his mind is racing because he can't just ignore all of this. After a while, there's a knock at his door and Teo's just thinking, fuck. Who could it be now? How could this possibly get worse? But when he opens the door, Huemak is waiting there for him. He calls Teo a troublemaker, affectionately, and Teo just falls into his arms and starts crying. Huemak holds Teo like he did when Teo was little and takes this moment to tell him how proud he is of him. Teo is in near hysterics, like doesn't think there's anything that Huemak would be proud of, but Huemak tells him how in awe he is of Teo and how much he has become himself during the trials. Even when Teo's like, I shouldn't be here in the first place, Huemak reminds him like that he didn't have a choice. And this reminds Teo of what Diosa Opcion said about everybody having a choice. As they're sitting there, Huemak tells Teo about why he started calling him a troublemaker in the first place. He's been calling Teo a troublemaker like basically his entire life, but the first time was when Quetzal had to give this big speech and Teo had just eaten and wouldn't burp and decided that the perfect moment to spit up was when Huemak passed him to Quetzal. Teo doesn't know how this relates, but then Huemak says, and it didn't matter, Teo. Your mother laughed too. She had many, many photos taken with spit up on her after that. You taught me it didn't matter. You've never respected authority or formality from the very beginning. Huemak fixed Teo with a serious look. But you don't cause trouble for the sake of hurting others. When you see things that are unjust, when you see people who are acting unjustly, you cause trouble by interrupting them. You are a loud, impulsive, persistent seeker of justice, and that makes people uncomfortable, but that doesn't make you bad. It makes you very good, in fact, far better than the rest of us who stay quiet because they're afraid to speak up. Teo thinks that is the nicest thing Huemak's ever said to him, but still thinks he's made a fool of himself. Huemak tells him that he spoke up because it felt right, and it's not Teo's fault that the gods didn't listen. And hearing this, Teo feels even worse because at that moment realizes that his mom didn't believe him either. And Huemak says, I'm only mortal, Teo. I understand what it's like to feel that my actions are inconsequential. We must try to do what is right, regardless of who is willing to listen. It's at this moment that Teo admits that he's really scared, that he's ruined the stupid dinner, and that everybody hates him now. Huemak tells Teo that he has good friends, and that Nia, of all people, he shouldn't sell short. During the entirety of their friendship, it would have just been easier if she hadn't been Teo's friend, because he's a jade and she's a gold. Through everything, like, she is there for him. And if all else fails, he can buy her forgiveness with his contraband candy. Teo gave him a wry smile. You knew about that, huh? Huemak chuckled and clapped Teo on the back. Soul isn't the only all-seeing one. I know in the very beginning of the book, Teo talked about how his dad was dead. And for a while I was convinced that Huemak was actually Teo's dad. But I think it's just like that father-son relationship is so strong between those two. And I love it because we all have those like friends or mentors or people in our lives who are like, yeah, you're annoying and you do dumb shit, but I love you anyways. I'm going to be here to support you no matter what. And that I just love their relationship so much. Huimek leaves, and Teo can't sit still. So he decides to go to the top of the temple to where the observatory is and where they keep the soul stone. He's sitting there looking out into the distance where all the beams from the various sunstones across the various cities are shooting up into the sky. And somebody comes up and says oh, there you are. And Teo turns to see Aurelio. Teo very teasingly asks Aurelio if his mom is going to be pissed that he snuck out of his room when they're supposed to stay in their rooms all night. Aurelio just says, she's usually mad at me, so I'm not sure this will make much of a difference. Please give this boy some love. At this moment, we also get a brief description of how warm Teo is sitting next to Aurelio and his bare, muscular thighs. Teo says something about how he's always wanted to see the other cities in Reino del Sol, but now Aurelio has to be Desi out to be Sunbearer, so when he is going around refilling all the sunstones, Teo can show him all of Quetzalán. And Aurelio goes quiet and doesn't respond right away. They kind of sit in that silence for a moment, and then because Teo cannot keep his mouth shut, he asks Aurelio if he thinks he's a liar too. After another moment, he tells Teo no. Something does feel off, and for a second he really did think that Auristela was going to bash Teo's skull in. She's competitive, but she's not violent, and Teo's well, I'm just gonna have to take your word for it, I guess. All of the golds are competitive by nature, but at the academy it's more friendly competition than rivalries against each other. And Aurelio justifies all the tension and the weirdness as the stress getting to all of them, because yeah, I would be under stress too if I was in a potential death trial. Teo asks Aurelio about what happened during the last trial, because they were in the room with the sunstone before Auristela destroyed the fake soulstone. She tried to get Aurelio to take it. Aurelio tells Teo that it's complicated, and Teo tells him he's got time. So Aurelio slowly begins to elaborate on the situation. Aurelio and Auristela have always been close. When they were back home and raised by their mortal dad, Aurelio was so excited to start at the academy because that meant he got to spend time with his mom. But when he got there, that wasn't the case at all. His mom just kept pressing and pressing the importance of being a gold and how they should only be friends and associate with the strongest of the gold semidioses. Aurelio turned to face him, and Teo caught himself holding his breath. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. It was a shitty thing to do, Aurelio said, refusing to look away. You were so nice to me, the only person who tried to be my friend. I treated you horribly, and I regret it every day. Teo doesn't know if he's ready to forgive Aurelio completely yet, because that ache of losing him as a friend has been sitting with him for so long. And Aurelio thinks it's funny because as a kid he was so desperate to join the academy and get to see his mom, but once he got his mom's attention, it wasn't what he expected. And out of everyone, Auristela was the only one who understood what he was going through. That's why I'm so close with my sister, Aurelio continued, his coppery gaze sliding to Teo. She's the only one I'm allowed to be close to. She's the only person I've ever really been able to rely on. Lumbre expects the two of them not only to be model students, but to be model heroes, model gold, not just good, but exceptional. Auristela, if you can't tell, she's very protective. The reason she wanted Aurelio to take the soul stone was so he could win the trial. That plan was very, very poorly constructed, and when Aurelio didn't take it, she decided no one gets to take the soul stone. She wanted Aurelio to win so badly so he could prove himself as not being a failure to Lumbre. What? Teo said, a jump laughing in his throat. How the hell does she think you're a failure? Surely this was some kind of joke. He was Aurelio, the golden boy. How could anyone accuse him of being anything less than perfect? And then Aurelio looks at Teo and just says, I'm not fireproof. If you remember way back earlier, all the children of Diosa Lumbre are historically fireproof. Aurelio can manipulate fire. His skin doesn't get quite as damaged as fast, and as long as he doesn't hold it for too long, it doesn't injure his skin, but it still burns when he is exposed to flame for too long. Oh, I'm so excited for this part. Aurelio pulled up the sleeves of his hoodie, revealing his ever-present golden armbands. He fiddled with the small clasps on his left arm, and Teo's heart leapt into his throat. He wanted to reach out and tell him to stop. Whatever Aurelio was about to show him, Teo knew he wasn't ready to see. Marbled scars encircled Aurelio's arm. Some were darker brown, while others were bright red and shiny. Teo leaned forward. They wrapped around in shapes Teo recognized, but couldn't quite put his finger on. It was a matter of getting used to it, Aurelio said, his voice quiet as they sat next to each other, heads bowed over his arm. He flexed his fingers, and patches of scar tissue pulled taut over muscle. Resistance training, my mother called it. A sudden coldness struck Teo in his core. He recognized the shapes now. Handprints. The same size, but layered and in different stages of healing. Now, Teo wants to punch a god. He asks Aurelio if it hurts, and Aurelio, again, just like looks at him and goes, every time. Oh, no, oh no. Why do you have to hurt me like this? Fun fact, one of my favorite tropes ever is hurt comfort. This is my bread and butter, baby. This is checking all of the boxes, but every time, it hurts. It hurts me so much. Auristela thinks that if Aurelio is a Sunbearer, Lumbre will forgive him for his shortcomings. While Aurelio doesn't agree with her trying to bash Teo's head in, she's the most important thing for him, and he would do anything for her too. He doesn't care about being the Sunbearer at all. He just wants both of them to end up alive. And at this moment, you may be wondering, you may be thinking to yourself, oh, Jaden, Auristela's just looking out for Aurelio. Like, all the things she's doing is because she loves her brother so much. And while yes, I do understand, I also think, as I've said previously, it costs $0 to be nice to people. You can be competitive and not be an asshole. Teo understands that desire to protect people. Both of them have people who are at or close to the bottom of the rankings. And regardless of what happens or who ends up at the bottom, someone has to die. Like, end of story, period. And the struggle Teo is currently having is now these aren't faceless gold semidioses that he has no relationships with. He has talked to all of these people. He knows them and sees their relationships. Their lives are so much bigger and fuller than everything that's happening in the trials. They are not the malicious, egotistical villains that he's built up in his head. Like, yes, Auristela and Ocello are giant assholes, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to die. They don't deserve to be picked as a sacrifice. Teo was sickened by himself. He'd wanted to win for all the wrong reasons. Not for some noble cause, but because he wanted to feel worthy. But it wasn't too late. There was still time to fix it. Even if something is fucking with the trials and making people go a little crazy, they all still have to compete, and someone at the end of the day has to die. Like, that is the point of the trials. Aurelio will do whatever it takes to keep his sister safe, and Teo will do the exact same thing for Nia and Shio. Aurelio looks up at the sky and points out the constellations of the obsidians. Teo follows his gaze and is like, oh, so that's what we're fighting for, to keep away some big balls of light. But Aurelio tells him that the reality is much worse than that. Aurelio tells him that he's been thinking about what Teo said, like, way back, long time ago, about the winner being the sacrifice. And while he doesn't think Teo's right, he doesn't think he's entirely wrong either. If it came down to it, Aurelio doesn't think he'd be able to go through with the sacrifice. Even if he didn't know them, he doesn't think he would be capable of doing that. Tentatively, Teo leaned his shoulder against Aurelio's. He tensed, but didn't pull away. I hope you don't have to, Teo said quietly. Aurelio's shoulders slumped and he leaned into Teo. Just a touch, the warmth of his skin spreading through Teo's side. They fell into silence, staring up at the soul stone as it burned. We are getting down to it, y'all. It is the morning of the final trial, and there is too much time before the literal killing time. Tension is high and spirits are low. The last trial is in an undisclosed location and people are lining the canals as the boat is traveling to its final destination. Teo wondered if these people understood what they were cheering for. This wasn't a silly parade celebrating a fun holiday. It was a funeral procession. It's fucking rough, buddy. The sun sets as they travel and Nia lets out her nervous energy by just talking at no one. Everybody is like very, very quiet. And Nia is just talking endlessly, which honestly, me too. Really. If you've lasted this long, honestly, kudos to you. Like, I'm impressed. I've barely lasted this long. Eventually, the boat gets to a small, rundown city, and all of the gold just goes stiff, and even Nia goes quiet. Shochi's like, they can't be serious, and Teo doesn't know where they are, but in front of them is this huge ass jungle just looming. Teo asks where they are, and Aurelio answers that it is Los Restos. Los Restos is the abandoned ruins of the obsidian gods. After they were locked up, their cities and temples were destroyed, and the jungle has pretty much reclaimed most of it. Now it's a place where dangerous animals and monsters roam freely. As they approach the city, it starts to rain, not like this nice warm rain like they have experienced in the past, but this very cold, very painful rain. A little taste of the foreboding aura that we have here today. The last trial, Luna explains, is to follow a path. It isn't a race, but the deeper they get into the jungle, the more dangerous things will become. Oh my god, where's that goddamn fly? It's taunting me. It isn't a race, but the deeper they get into the jungle, the more dangerous things become. Some paths cross, and the finish is where all of the glyphs converge. All of their suits light up, and there aren't many rules for this trial, but one of the rules is if they leave the designated paths, their lights on their suits will go out and they fail. Once they cross the finish line, they can't go back, and all they have to do is reach the end. The thing that they're being judged on during this trial is how well they defended themselves from the influence of the obsidians and the aura that is left in this ruined city. They all line up. Shio gives Teo a reassuring nod, like the yeah, I'm gonna be okay sort of nod. Teo is still very nervous about everything. And the last trial begins. The jungle is so thick that once they enter the trees, Teo can't see the sky anymore. And at that point, the only light is coming from his suit. Because the jungle's so thick, he can't use his wings, so he just starts running, which we know Teo is not good at. So he eventually slows down and starts to call out for his friends. It's raining. We know it's raining, but now when Teo looks up, there are clouds under the cover of the trees, and all of a sudden a bolt of lightning explodes in front of him. Otzi has snuck up on Teo. She is trying to egg him on and get Teo to react, to get back at her for shooting him down during the first trial. But as she's talking, something seems really off, and Teo isn't quite sure what. Turns out it's not Otzi. Teo watches as her face shifts into Ocello's face, who then lunges at Teo, claws out. They punch Teo in the jaw, and Teo, being Teo, is cheeky as ever and is like, is that all you got? And once again, the illusion shifts. This time, it shifts into Diosa Lumbre. At this point, Teo knows that this is not the real Lumbre, but the fire she is throwing is very real. He is just trying to avoid getting into this fight, and very quickly, Teo realizes that the illusion could have beaten Teo multiple times. Otzi has knocked him out of the sky before. Ocello is Ocello, and Lumbre is a diosa. She could easily just take him out if he wanted to, because he has no training. He is just kind of doing the best he can with the situation he's given. And there's no way he'd be able to outlast any of them. The point of the trial is to finish. The point is to get to the end. And this illusion is just trying to draw him into the fight. So why would he get into a fight that he can't win? Teo equates this to when you're playing video games. It gets to a point where you just need to run away from the enemy, and so that's what he does. He knows that the paths have to converge at some point, so he presses on. And the next time the paths converge, there's already somebody waiting there. Marino is panicking. He's almost at the edge of the path. He's reaching over, and when he sees Teo, he tells him that they have to help Desi. Desi is not taking Marino's hand, and Teo looks into the darkness off the path and is like, Marino, there is nothing there. It's just dark. Desi isn't there. Marino almost launches over the edge into the darkness, out of the bounds of the path, and would then fail the trial, and Teo was like, Marino, Desi isn't there. It's just Los Restos messing with us. Marino still doesn't believe him, but then further down the path is the real life Desi. And when Marino sees him, they just run to each other and like Marino collapses into Desi's arms. Teo realizes that they all have people that they want to protect, and the illusions are doing their damnedest to trick them into leaving the path. They just need to finish. They just need to get to the end. Marino nodded solemnly, his hands moving as he relayed Teo's revelation to Desi. A look of understanding spread across his face and his hands started moving too. He saw things too, Marino translated. The boys looked at each other with such sadness and relief that Teo felt like he was intruding. So, they are dating, right? I think they're dating. I headcanon. If it's not canon, I headcanon it. I ship it. Now that some of the paths have converged, Teo has multiple options. He could go forward and risk leaving Shio behind, or risk going back and letting Shio go into the thick of the jungle and face all of that danger alone. So it's like 50-50 on what he should do. Eventually, he goes with his gut and turns back to try and find his friends. It is very tempting to want to go forward to just finish the trial, but this has been his goal since the beginning, is to make sure his friends are okay. Back on the path, he finds Nia standing in the middle of a platform, and she is like, oh my god, I can't touch the ground. But really, it's just an illusion. Like, she is not that far off the ground, but because she is semi-diosa of Earth, she doesn't like not being on the ground. It seems almost too good to be true for Teo, so he's like, tell me something that only the real Nia would know. When we were 10, you ate a roly-poly at the Midsummer Festival and made me lie about it. When we were 13, you got that horrible haircut and made me edit all your Instagraphia posts for a month until it grew back in. When we were 15 he's like, stop. You better be the real Nia, or else you're gonna have to answer for sharing all of my most embarrassing tween moments on live TV. Nia has also been hearing things, but hasn't seen Shio. So they continue back down the path looking for him, and very quickly they find him. And Shio was like, what are you doing here? And both Nia and Shio were like, we were looking for you. What else? Nia rushed forward and dragged him to his feet. We thought something might have happened to you. Teo looked at the boy closely. Nia, how do we know it's really him? Shio's expression filled with confusion. Of course it's him. Look at how sad he is, she pointed out. An illusion wouldn't just sit there looking helpless. He didn't know how to argue with that. Nia, I love you, but oh god, everything hurts. Shio had gotten lost, but Teo tells him it doesn't matter now. They have a lot of time to make up, and they just need to get to the end. So they start running. They finally start getting somewhere when their path merges with the twins' paths. They look roughed up. Aurelio has a limp, but they are still doing okay. Our trio falls in just like slightly behind, so they don't notice them there. After a while, they start to see glimmers of a golden light off in the distance. Teo thinks they're close to the end, and they finally emerge onto this large platform, and in the center is Soul's glyph with a little barrier where the finish line is. Ocello and Desi have finished, and Teo just prays that this is the actual real finish line and not just another trick. Our trio approaches the platform, and that is when the twins notice that they're there. When he sees Teo, Aurelio almost grins, but Audicilla hesitates. A look crosses her face. They're all heading towards the finish line, and Teo's like, at this point, who cares if the twins like actually beat them? Like, they did it. They made it to the end. All three of them are completing the trial, and that is especially important for Shio. Aurelio crosses into the finish line. Desi and Ocello are already there, clapping him on the back and like congratulating him, but the moment very, very quickly dies. Auristela didn't follow Aurelio through to the finish line. She turns back to them, and Teo's stomach drops completely. When Auristela opened her eyes, they were black as coals, the skin around them dark and webbed with black veins. Her nostrils flared, and wet pieces of hair stuck to her cheeks. Her lips curled back over her perfect white teeth. It was happening again. This time, Teo knew he wasn't imagining it. Once Aurelio realizes what's happening, he is banging on the barrier to try and call for Auristela, but nobody can hear him. Teo shoves Shio out of the way as Auristela lights her palm on fire, and Teo is exhausted. Like, he just wants He just wants to be done with the trial. But right now, the main goal is to keep her away from Shio. So he draws her attack towards him, and things quickly become chaos. Audrey-Stella only grew more ferocious, grunting and seething as she threw volley after volley at Teo. A gust of wind from Teo's wings sent one of her fireballs careening on the curved path. It connected with one of the horizontal logs laid at the platform, the fire crackling as it took hold of the wood. I should also note here that around them is darkness that keeps going like in and out, very much like a strobe light. Sometimes it's like completely black and silent. Sometimes Teo can hear and see like the crowds cheering. It's very disorienting in this fight to them, but also to me. Like, I couldn't geographically place it, so if things get confusing, I apologize, but that is, just imagine that it's basically like you're standing in a room with a strobe light and people are moving at you. So Teo's disoriented, Audrey-Stella's disoriented too, and she like stumbles and sends a crescent of flames at Teo. So he shoots into the air, but he is still really, really sore from the last trial when she had him pinned down by his wings. And so he clears the flame coming for him, but then crashes back down. She goes in for the kill, shouting, "This is for my brother!" And Teo braces for it, but a silver chain shoots around Audrey-Stella's wrist, and Nia is there. She basically stops Audrey-Stella, lifts Teo off the ground, and pulls him to his feet. Teo asks where Shio is, but doesn't get an answer. Something wasn't adding up. Audrey-Stella had been aggressive during the other trials, but this was on a whole other level. This was vicious and unrelenting, with no regard for others' safety. Regardless of how much she hated Teo, it didn't add up to the picture Aurelio had painted of his sister at all. Audrey-Stella is getting more and more frenzied as the fight goes on, and eventually her entire body is just a fireball. Like, she is just completely on fire. And then during the fight, she like inhales and Nia's like, "Get down!" and pulls Teo to the ground. She uses her bangles to make a shield to block herself and Teo as Audrey-Stella breathes a stream of fire at them. And it's so hot that it starts to melt Nia's shield. Before it melts completely, Audrey-Stella runs out of her fire breath. She inhales to do it again, but Nia body slams her with her shield and sends her flying. They have a slight reprieve from Audrey-Stella's attack, but now she has her eyes on Shio. Teo and Nia yell at him to run, so he does, but Audrey-Stella is chasing after Shio, and with every step, the fire is spreading on the platform, and the holes in the ground are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Aurelio finally shouts loud enough that Audrey-Stella can hear him through the barrier of like the finish line. She turns, acknowledges him, and then the platform under her completely crumbles and a log falls, and I think it basically catapults her off into the abyss. Something changed in Audrey-Stella's eyes. The angry snarl on her face flashed to surprise. The fire engulfing her went out. The angry bruising and black veins were gone, leaving nothing but fear in her ember eyes. For the first time since they came upon her on the platform, it was as if she was finally seeing the scene clearly. Audrey-Stella scrambled to hang on, but her fingers slipped uselessly over the smooth, shimmering black log. She lost her grip and fell without another sound. No one could do anything but watched as the golden light of her suit plummeted, faded, and blinked out. Teo searches for Shio, who is hanging on for dear life to another log. He is far enough away that if he jumps, he will likely fall or land on one of the holes that Audrey-Stella created with the fire, but his suit is still lit, so Shio is still in the game. Now, without the jungle overhead, Teo can use his wings. He's sore as shit, but knows that he has to do it for Shio. Teo flies over there and holds his arms out. Shio is worried that he'll fall, so Teo grabs him by the sweatshirt and like pulls him. They aren't exactly flying because Teo is so sore, but it's just enough that they can grab onto the edge of the platform and dangle over the side. Fire is eating at the platform, and there are only seconds before the structure just crumbles entirely and they're both disqualified from the trial. They were 50 feet from the barrier around the finish point. Teo could make 50 feet. With all his strength, he gathered his momentum, swinging Shio back and forth, and then finally letting go. Even with Shio flailing and adding drag to his descent, Nia tracked him and was exactly where she needed to be to catch him when he fell back to the platform. And, just like Teo hadn't dared to hope, she toppled backward, straight through the barrier past the finish point with Shio still in her grasp. Teo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It had worked. His friends were safe. He could let go now. As Teo fell and the lights on his suit went out, He prayed to Sol that as I'm getting, oh God, I gotta breathe through it. As Teo fell and the lights on his suit went out, he prayed to Sol that it had been enough to keep Shio safe. And then everything went dark. And with that, the final trial is complete. Teo, Shochi, Otzi, Audrey-Stella, and also in the book it says Desi, but I would swear to God in the ebook version it says that Desi and Ocello greeted Aurelio behind the finish line, so I don't know what's true and what's not. The ones who didn't finish are brought back to the platform for the rankings. Nia is absolutely like unbelievably relieved that Teo's all right, and she was just like looking at Teo in complete shock of what happened. Audrey-Stella looks like an entirely different person. It looks like all of the fight is completely drained out of her at this point. And now Teo doesn't even care about the rankings. He just knows that somebody's going to end up on the bottom, and that means that they are going to be sacrificed. They're going to be killed. And as much as he hates himself for it, he is just like praying for it not to be Shio. He has worked too hard to fail, and he wouldn't be able to stand it if Shio ended up being the sacrifice. None of them deserved to have their lives end. What other choice was there? Without sacrificing someone's life to keep the soul stone fueled, the world would end and all the people of Reino del Sol would be doomed. How could Sol ever possibly decide whose life was worth sacrificing to save the rest of them? Luna steps forward and announces that Sol has determined the rankings. As the glyphs shift and change, all Teo can do is watch Shio's glyph until finally, it moves from last place up to 9th. Teo feels total, utter, absolute relief. Shio is safe, but he can't go over to celebrate with him because priests have just like filled the platform, and Aurelio cries out, "Wait!" Teo's heart drops. He checks the rankings again and he sees Diosa Lumbre's glyph is at the very, very bottom, but it's not Aurelio's glyph. It is Audrey-Stella's. He stepped forward, reaching for his sister, but Diosa Lumbre's hand shot out, gripping him by the shoulder. Aurelio winced but stopped, his fingers catching on empty air. Stricken, Aurelio's chest heaved with shaky breaths, and Teo's heart sank. Because he'd saved Shio, Audrey-Stella had lost. The stands broke out into thunderous applause. Teo can't comprehend or begin to process anything because he just keeps focusing on how they're cheering because Audrey-Stella is going to die. He can't even celebrate the fact that Shio gets to live because his choices caused her to be ranked last. Teo turned, searching for Nia, only to find himself suddenly surrounded by smiling priests. He stumbled back a step, bumping into his mom. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run. Diosa Luna stepped towards him, a calm smile on her face. Teo, instinctively, leaned away. "Congratulations, Teo," she said, but he didn't understand why. Finally, he looked up at the top of the rankings board. There was a sudden, familiar weight on Teo's head. He reached up, and the cold prongs of the sunburst crown brushed against his fingertips. Sol had chosen him as the Sunbearer. Luna presents him as the Sunbearer and Audrey-Stella as the sacrifice. Audrey-Stella is led away and Teo is frozen. Nia and Shio are just standing there and Quetzal rushes up to him and gives him the biggest mom hug ever. "You did it, Teo," his mom sang in his ear. And she was right. First, the double meaning of that paragraph has me in a freaking chokehold. In the first interpretation of it, he did it. He completed the trials, successfully became the Sunbearer, but he also did it as in make choices that caused Audrey-Stella to drop to the bottom of the rankings. It just makes the whole winning the trials heartbreaking. I'm still by no means an Audrey-Stella apologist, but it's so sad. The first chance they have to leave, Aurelio is the first one out of there. Teo tries to apologize, but Aurelio snaps at Teo and is like, "I told you, she is all I have." And Aurelio just breaks. Just completely shatters. He says that he could have taken her place. He blames Teo, saying that he let her fall on purpose, knowing she'd come in last. But it's what Aurelio has been telling Teo all along. there has to be a sacrifice. Like, there's no way around it. It very much goes back to it doesn't matter if it doesn't apply to you. And Teo can't argue with Aurelio, so Aurelio just turns and leaves. And Teo lets him go. Everyone is gathered at the temple for the ceremony, and Teo is having an out-of-body experience as the priests are buzzing around him, like getting him ready. While they're preparing him, he is looking at this mural that tells the story of soul sacrifice and notices one of the last panels. Soul shone in the sky above the people of Reino del Sol as they lived their lives in peace, protected by the sun's rays. Soul had given their life to protect their people, just like every sacrifice thereafter. But something didn't sit quite right with Teo. It kept poking at the back of his brain. What is poking at the back of his brain? I don't know yet. Before he can complete that thought, Quaymac steps in and is the one to finish preparing Teo for the ceremony. And when all the other priests leave, Quaymac describes to him what to do in a very matter-of-fact, step-by-step way. Like, here's where her heart is, here's how to angle the knife, like put your entire weight into the handle. Quaymac retrieved the sunburst crown. Release her quickly. Auristela, Quaymac paused, the crown hovering above Teo's head. Finally, his eyes dropped to meet Teo's. Auristela, he repeated. Not her. Auristela. Oh, Jesus Christ. Quaymac's dark, tired eyes considered Teo for a moment. His features were smooth and expressionless. He gave Teo a smile that was a little more than a grim twist of the mouth. Auristela, Quaymac agreed. Oh my god. I cried while writing the script, and it just gets me every fucking time. Okay, I gotta finish this. We're so close. It is 2 a.m. Teo is ushered to the observatory and is brought in front of all of the other competitors. He looks for Aurelio, who is stiff and clearly has been crying and will not look at Teo. Luna calls him forward and presents him to the crowd. They cheer, and Teo doesn't want to be here, like he thinks he's going to be sick. Auristela is brought forward by Phantasma, and she appears surprisingly steady, not like she just found out that she is about to be ritualistically sacrificed. She lays on the table, and Phantasma stays at her side, holding her hand, which I think is a growth moment for Auristela, because she called Phantasma mean names earlier in this book. I can't remember what off the top of my head, but I know she called her weird or something like that. Luna brought Teo to stand beside her, like some kind of prince approaching a sleeping princess in a fucked up fairy tale. Auristela had closed her eyes, but not in the gentle way where Teo could maybe convince himself she was asleep. They were tightly squeezed shut, her lips pressed between her teeth as her chin wobbled. Her arms were pressed to her sides, every muscle in her body taut as she waited for Teo to end her life. Above them, the Soul Stone is beginning to fade. It has been a decade since the last sacrifice was performed, and it needs to be refueled in order to continue protecting Reino del Sol. Teo's heart hammered in his throat, his breaths shallow and sharp. He looked out, trying to find someone, anyone who could reassure him, but no one met his gaze. Nia had lowered her head. Shio's eyes were on his wrist where he clutched at his bracelet in his hand. The only one who was watching was Aurelio. While everyone else diverted their gaze, Aurelio refused to turn away. He looked on helplessly, the tight lines of his face betraying his anguish, no matter how hard he tried to hide it, as Diosa Lumbre towered behind him. So the Soul Stone is fading, and Teo knows he has to do it. This is his responsibility as a Sunbearer, but he's still nagged about the way Auristela acted during the last trial. He doesn't want anyone to die, and especially not because of him. The light is going out, and Luna is like, Teo, now, I won't do it. The words flew out of his mouth, surprising Teo just as much as the people surrounding him. For a moment, there was silence as no one moved, and the Soul Stone continued to dim. Teo lowered his hands from over Auristela's chest. Everyone jumped into action. Everything dissolves into chaos. Luna is frantic and yelling for anyone to get the knife because they need to perform the sacrifice to refuel the Soul Stone. Aurelio is frantically calling for his sister. Shio appears beside Teo and tells him to give him the knife. Teo's thinking, okay, so Shio's gonna take the knife and he's gonna run, and then I don't need to do the sacrifice. And so he hands the knife over. Above him, the last embers of light faded from deep within the Soul Stone, revealing the golden skull hidden inside. Suddenly, Shio changed. What had been an expression of desperation and fear morphed into something dark. For the first time since they met, Teo could see a resemblance between Shio and Malasuerte. Shio? Teo asked. Even the priests had stumbled into a stop, watching the two semidioses in confusion. It's too late, Shio said, clutching the obsidian dagger protectively against his chest. The stone went out. He said it like he was relieved. A shuddering exhale rolled through Shio. His black eyes slid to Teo. Soul can't help you now. Shio raised the dagger to his opposite palm. As the blade pulled away, a trail of obsidian black blood dripped to the ground. 3 girls that were picking on him got lice so bad they had to shave their hair off. I've never felt like I belong or fit in anywhere, and not because I'm a jade. There was a series of tiles with a goat head. Damn, that's Venganza, the god of vengeance. What happened to my sad sweet boy? So we're gonna continue. I have thoughts. I have many thoughts. The ground shakes and the stars begin to fall. They rain down as the temple starts to fall apart. A huge glyph starts rocking right above where Audistella was laying on the sacrificial slab, and Teo dives to get her out of the way. All Teo is thinking at this point, like, he's just reacting to the situation, and all he's thinking is like, what did Shio do? What did I do? Luna is shouting at everyone, like, leave before they get here. The stars are falling and 3 new figures appear. A woman in a black cloak with the head of a chupacabra, a tall, slender person with a blue skin and a featureless face, and a man with a goat's head. Shio goes over and stands with them. Every trace of fear and tension that he had during the trials is completely gone, and he looks triumphant. Venganza steps forward and is like, how time flies when you've been locked away for a millennia. And then Venganza turns to Shio and congratulates him on a job well done. And watching this, several things begin to click into place for Teo. And honestly, for me too. Shio, lacking any powers from Malasuerte, how he kept falling in the trials, his black blood dripping from the cut in his palm. Shio wasn't a jade at all. He was an obsidian. Venganza looks at all of the other competitors gathered there and goes, oh, look at all these half-gods waiting for us to take them under our wings. You're the one Soul deemed worthy? And Hierro tries to step between the semidioses and the obsidians and is quickly knocked away by chaos. Black fire comes to life, encircling all the semidioses. And as this happens, Venganza turns to Teo and thanks him for finishing the job that he thought his son would fail. Teo looks to Shio for any sort of answer, or I don't know, maybe like a haha, JK, LOL, and Shio will not look at him. Luna tries her very best to protect all of the semidioses from the obsidians, but Venganza turns to her and tells her that when they were locked away, everything had been taken from them. Their cities, their temples, their families, and now it's only fair that they take their most prized semidioses. Luna is still fighting. She tries to step forward, but then the color drains from her and she collapses. Remind me, Chupacabra, how does the moon live without the sun? Venganza asked. He reached forward and plucked the soul stone from the ground. The light was quickly fading, the tiny sun flares shrinking. Usually too bright to look at, now Teo could see the soul's golden skull under the glass surface. Diosa Luna's hand shot out. Don't! Chupacabra threw her head back and howled in glee. Ah, that's right, Venganza purred, his eyes sliding to Diosa Luna. She doesn't. The last tiny bit of glow fades from the soul stone. In that moment, Luna bursts into stars. Gone. Poof. The moon no longer exists. Chaos twists their hands and opens up a rift in the temple floor, and there is this magnetic pull that starts tugging all the semidioses towards it. Ocello falls into the hole first. Then it is Shochi and Otzi. Nia yells for Teo, and he turns to see that she is getting dragged back. So Teo launches into the air, grabbing her around her waist, and they both start to fall back until Nia uses her bangles to make 2 spikes to stab into the stone to anchor themselves. Desi falls next, and Shio is also getting pulled into this weird portal. Teo doesn't think, he just acts on instinct in the same way he would do in any of the other trials and grabs Shio. But now, Shio is fighting it. "Don't you get it?" Shio shouted. "I don't need your help. I don't want you to save me. I am Obsidian, and this is our revenge." With a final wrench, Shio slammed his small fist into Teo's chest, breaking free of him and falling into the dark. Above him, Nia cried out in dismay. Teo's head filled with static, unable to make sense of what just happened. Auristela shouts Aurelio's name, and Teo sees them dangling in front of the rift. Aurelio is holding on to the sacrificial table as best as he can, but Auristela is slipping down his arm. Teo knows he needs to help and decides to launch himself before Nia realizes what he's doing and can stop him. He angles himself just right so he catches on the other end of the table. He tries to hold himself there while reaching for Aurelio, but Aurelio is just out of his reach. By now, Aurelio is only holding Auristela by her wrist, and the portal has begun to slowly start closing. They just need to last moments before the portal closes. But Teo sees that the hand Aurelio has holding onto the table is completely bloodied and is starting to slip away. Additionally, the table is starting to crack. It can't hold the weight of 3 people anymore. It is going to basically dissolve if they are hanging on here for much longer. Teo pressed his thighs against the stone, trying to get more leverage to stretch farther. The rift continued to close. He only needed a couple more inches, but Auristela didn't allow it. Her eyes flicked to Teo. "Find us," she shouted over the noise of panicked cries. Aurelio shook his head fiercely, refusing to let go. A section of stone fell away. Teo dug deeper and held on, every fiber of his muscles screaming. Auristela ignited a fire in her hand. Aurelio cried out in pain. He tried to hold on, to fight through it, but it was too much for him to handle. Auristela slipped through his fingers, and she falls into the portal. Aurelio tries to dive after Auristela into the portal, but Teo is faster and grabs him before he can go. Auristela is the last person to get sucked into the rift before it finally closes. Once it does, Teo and Aurelio crash to the ground and the world is basically silent. The observatory is chaos. Aurelio is absolutely disassociating. Quetzal finds Teo while he's looking for Nia, and Nia is curled in on herself as Tierra is holding her. When she looked up, her nose and eyes were bright red, her chin dimpled. He looked her over, but didn't see any cuts or gold blood, but the pain written across her face looked excruciating. Her face was pinched and streaked with fresh tears. Her hands were upturned in her lap, palms red and raw. "They're gone," she choked. "We couldn't save them." She looked up at Teo with eyes full of anguish he'd never seen before. "I wasn't strong enough." Nia's face crumpled. Tierra pulled her tight to his chest. "Don't hurt her. Please don't hurt my golden retriever, himbo girl. She is doing so good and she is so strong and I love her." The chapter ends and we cut to moments later when Teo tries apologizing to Aurelio. "I did this," he stammered, barely able to wrap his mind around how thoroughly he had fucked up this time. "If I had just killed her instead?" Aurelio gulped down air like he'd been punched in the chest. "No, you couldn't kill her. I should have known you couldn't. You're just too..." He shook his head. "You did what you thought was right," Aurelio managed. "I am the one who left her behind." Aurelio is still on the ground at this point. He is curled up with his arms around himself, and Teo can't think of anything else to do besides hug him because he doesn't want him to be alone. It wasn't about fault or blame. It wasn't about the trials or the apocalypse. All that mattered right now was Aurelio's pain. Aurelio's body went limp under the embrace, his arms wrapped around Teo, fists curled into feathers. Things start moving very quickly after that. Teo's having a crisis. Nia is in German Shepherd mode, and by German Shepherd mode, I mean very similar to Golden Retriever mode, but more of yes, I want, on high alert protective mode. And Diosa Lumbre seems to have emerged as the one in charge. She declares that they need a plan because without the Soul Stone, it will be night until the Obsidians gain enough power to destroy the world. And Dios Mays is like, We need to know what happened. Everyone looks to Teo. Half the room also looks for Mala Suerte, but at this point, he has disappeared. He is gone. He has dipped. Everybody starts asking questions about Shio and Mala Suerte and if this was the Jade's plan all along. And then Tierra suddenly speaks up and says, "Hope is not yet lost." Lumbre argues that Sol had the power to banish the Obsidians, but they're dead. And Tierra's like, just gone from this world. It's up to us to bring them back. Remember at the very beginning, Tierra was Sol's partner. He dispersed Sol's body as the Sunstones, and Sol can't come back in that many pieces, but if all of the Sunstones were brought together, maybe they could come back. Lumbre is like, remove the Sunstones from our temples, and Aurelio stands up to his mom. He has no more fucks left to give. And he says, well, the Obsidians are free now. The Sunstones are going to be pretty useless when they're not refueled. Lumbre does not like either of their answers, and she starts to make a plan with Diosquiero about how to go to war, essentially. How to protect Reino del Sol. In the middle of this impromptu war planning, Aurelio announces that he will go after the Obsidians. Lumbre says no, but Aurelio's like, I will go, and while I'm at it, I'll just also rescue all of the semidioses that were taken. Aurelio is the golden boy, and so a lot of the gods, especially the ones whose children were taken, are game with this plan. And Lumbre announces very rudely, I will not send a child after gods. And here Teo notes that she said a child, not my child. Like, you know, I will not send my child after gods. Like, that sounds much better and much more, like, motherly. Aurelio argues that it is the Dios's responsibility to stay and protect the cities, so their best bet is to send him to go get the semidioses. The Obsidians weren't the only ones banished to the stars, boy. The celestial monsters were locked up with their masters. Without Sol, they've been set free to wreak havoc and destruction on our world. You couldn't possibly fathom the horrors that have been unleashed. It was here all along, celestial monsters. Also, that's just such a badass title, and I so love it. I love it so much. Aurelio and Lumbre are still arguing, and Aurelio is very determined to keep his people safe, and Lumbre thinks it is useless. Teo watched Aurelio's expression tighten with resolve. He had no regard for himself or his safety. Brave, foolish Aurelio, who would set himself on fire to keep others warm. Teo swallowed his fear. If Aurelio was risking his life to save their friends, then Teo would go too. But before he could voice this decision, his mother clamped a hand down hard on his shoulder. Quetzal tells Teo to follow her, and a small group is gathered in Luna's office. Tierra and Phantasma are in the center of the circle with Nia and Aurelio. Quetzal and Teo join them, and a few other gods are there too. Tierra tells them that the Obsidians breaking free was always a possibility, and that while Lumbre will convince most of the other gods that they should prepare for war, they can work to bring Sol back. Since it takes about 2 weeks to refuel all the Sunstones, there is still some time before all hope is lost. He tells them that they need to split up into 4 groups, north, south, east, and west, to retrieve all the Sunstones, and a group needs to go to Los Restos to get the Soul Stone and the semidioses. But the Obsidians will be able to sense when other gods are in their temples or in their territories. But they can't sense semidioses. Aurelio is on board. Like, this boy is gonna go anyways, regardless if people tell him to or not. And since he is rescuing his sister and all the others, he'll just get the Soul Stone on the way. Teo corrects him and says, we will get the Soul Stone. And Nia too quickly jumps on this bagwagon and invites herself on this road trip. The Celestials are back, the sun has failed, and the moon is dead. This is the apocalypse, not a field trip. Dios Tormentoso warned with a rumble. A few of the other gold gods have joined the group at this point. Notably, Amor, Agua, Tormentoso, all of the dioses who have had children taken. One by one, they step forward and give our new trio, Teo, Nia, and Aurelio, some gifts. Amor steps forward and presents the trio with an elixir of charming to grant soothe speech for 10 minutes. Then Agua steps forward and gives them a decanter of endless water. Tormentoso gives them a bag of winds. Nia almost makes a joke about getting a bag of winds, and Teo has to like shoot her a look to make her not do it, because like you said, this is the apocalypse. Tiara steps forward and gives Nia his unbreakable blade, which is a type of metal that only children of Tiara can mold. Primavera gives them a gem of regeneration that can heal wounds. And then finally, Quetzal steps forward and gives Teo a feather. You have me, his mom said. With a quick tug, she pulled one of her brilliant blue-green feathers from her hair and laid it in Teo's palm. Always, Quetzal added with a reassuring smile. When you've gotten the soul stone, use this to summon us, and we'll arrive with sunstones to perform the ritual and resurrect soul. Phantasma also pushes through the crowd and gives Teo a half-burned, tapered candle, and seems very proud of herself. Teo feels a little silly with his feather and his used candle, but gifts from gods aren't small things, so he gracefully accepts them. Lumbre and Guerrero are waiting as many of the gods begin to leave and start planning on how to protect their cities, and Lumbre looks at Aurelio and goes, "You're siding with the Jades on this?" And bless his heart, Aurelio stands his ground. So she gives him a scorching circlet, which will amplify his fire powers. And then she also adds, it might make you almost as powerful as your sister. And Teo calls her a dick to her face, and she does not fight him, but I bet she wants to. Finally, Diosquero gives them their ring of shielding, which will summon their shield. Even though they're not down with the plan, they still have children that were taken and want them home too. So, what's the plan? Nia asked now that they were alone. Try to undo the apocalypse, I guess, Teo shrugged. Aurelio let out a mirthless laugh. You make it sound so easy. Teo bumped him with his shoulder. You have to admit, an end-of-the-world road trip does sound kind of fun. Aurelio grinned. It was a tired grin, but a grin nonetheless. Shit, Nia huffed with a heavy sigh. We're gonna need a bigger bag of candy. To be continued. So before I wrap this up, I have a few questions. And let me tell you, first, before my questions, let me tell you that last Wednesday, I found out that I won the Fierce Reads giveaway of an e-arc of Celestial Monsters. I got the email this Monday of like, okay, here's the copy. Like I found out I won on a Wednesday and then didn't get the book until Monday. I opened it up, read the prologue, was like, I better not read this because I want to ask my questions at the end of this video and not have the answers to them yet. Otherwise, I would have just devoured the book earlier this week. It is Friday now. I have been sitting, I've been buzzing. I have been trying to film as often as I can so I could finish this and then start reading the book. So that is what I'm doing all day tomorrow. Besides editing this, I need to edit 9 hours of footage, but I digress. Okay, so my questions. First, for the Celestial Monsters pre-order campaign, a new character card of our sweet sad boy Shio was unveiled. I did not have the forethought to print it out, so I'm just going to like put it on the screen here and we can discuss it. We can now confirm that Shio does have powers. His strength is vengeance manipulation, and his weakness is energy depletion, which I find really, really interesting. Going back and reading the book and like analyzing it again, you can see that. Like it's not just like, oh, I could see moments where Shio could have meddled in things, but like I can pick out specific moments, specific relationships between characters. I'm like, okay, that was intensified by him being there. So that is interesting. We can also now see that Shio's age is a whole bunch of question marks. Yeah, that was a question I had when I first read the book, was like, how is our sad sweet boy, our evil boy, our sad evil boy, how was he created? Because theoretically, the Obsidians have been locked away for eons, and so what? I'm so curious, and I'm so excited to read the books. And on the new card, we can also see that Shio is going by he/they pronouns now. So that's a positive development for him. Go Shio, figuring themselves out while the world ends. You gotta make time for self-discovery, like that's super important. And also look at his graph compared to the first one. I will put them up here. That's really interesting. So we're just being lied to the whole time? I mean, yes, but also, what?
Second question is, what is Malasuerte's role in all of this? Because notably, he is gone at the end of the Sunbearer Trials. And throughout the whole book, like, he was very protective of Shio. I am very curious about what happened. If Shio is a child of Venganza, then how did Malasuerte get involved, and why is he so protective of Shio? Is Malasuerte holding a grudge against the gold? Like, does he seek vengeance against the gold because of the way they've historically treated jade gods and semidioses? Did Shio manipulate that? Did he like manipulate? Because if he is as old as the Obsidians, then did he manipulate Malasuerte's like memories to make him believe that they were his child? Like, I'm very curious to see how all of that works. Like, how does that all play out? This is less of a question, more of just my thoughts. One of the things I really, really love about Aiden's books is that he does such a fantastic job at setting up all of this foreshadowing and making his books really enjoyable to go back and reread. Like, I am a big, huge, avid rereader. That is my favorite thing, when I go back to a book and I can pick out moments. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense when you know the end. It's like a plot twist, but it's not unexpected. Like, it is ramping up to that. And I feel like he did such a good job with all of these moments that built up to Shio's betrayal. Reading that for the first time, I absolutely lost my shit. I lost my shit. I set the book down. I had to go take a walk. Like, what? The sweet, sad, sweet boy. What happened to the sad, sweet boy? There are hints of this the entire time. First, there are Venganza's tiles in the 4th trial. Like, that is obvious now that you see it. Shio and Teo having these conversations where Shio's like, I feel like I don't belong. Like, all of this is set up so well, and I just like, amazing. I love it. I love it so much. Books I can read over and over again and pick something up new every single time are my favorite. On that note, I don't have this in my notes that I wrote, but then I was sitting at work thinking about filming, and this thought occurred to me. I was like, I have a theory, and it's really sad, but part of me believes that in Celestial Monsters, Aurelio is going to sacrifice himself to complete the cycle. Yes, they may bring Soul back, but there are so many times throughout the book where Teo is talking about Aurelio, and there's one specific quote where he's talking about how Aurelio, like, something about him seems more godly, like as if he was blessed by Soul himself. And I'll insert the quote I will insert the clip of me saying that quote here. There's always something about Aurelio, the glow of his skin, the burning intensity of his eyes, that made Teo wonder if he was favored by Soul. They were all half gods, but it was like Aurelio had been touched by the sun itself. Like, there are things like that, the constant conversations about if the Sunbearer should be the sacrifice. I have a gut feeling that Aurelio is going to try to sacrifice himself in order to protect Reino del Sol. Especially at the very, very end, when Teo is talking about how Aurelio would burn himself up to keep others warm. Like, that specifically, I'm like, okay, so there's gonna be some kind of, like, martyr, like, self-sacrifice, I feel like. But I don't know yet, and I am so excited to see what's gonna happen. And with that is all I have for my recap of the Sunbearer Trials. I just want to give a really, really big shout out to all of my friends who have heard me talk about this nonstop for weeks. In particular, I want to shout out to my friend Coral. She was also there when I absolutely dissolved into like feverish insanity after winning the giveaway. So thank you, Coral, for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed this as well. And thank you all for sticking with me through all of this. If y'all like this, at some point in the future, I would love to do one of these for Celestial Monsters after it's been out for a while. And there's a couple other books that I want to deep dive into as well. So we'll see what comes of that. Until next time, thanks for watching.